Good morning, America. Happy Labor Day. It is today's a holiday, and it's time. People enjoy celebrating, doing barbecues. The news out is pretty sad, and so we're gonna take a stop and focus on some of the breaking news that happened over the weekend and breaking news coming out this morning. Um, and we're going to focus on and kind of wrap up IRS expenses as well. But I do think it's important to focus on things that are shaking the nation, shaking the world, and happening right now. So I'm talking about the hostages that were killed over the weekend in Gaza. And right now we have the president and vice president, Biden and Harris, meeting in the Situation Room. And it's going to be very interesting to see what comes out of this. So we'll be right back and get you informed. Good morning, everybody. We've got some, as I alluded to or mentioned before the break, that we have some pretty serious stuff to cover. Always try to smile, start the show with a smile, the good attitude. Some of the stuff we're going to talk about, what's happening right now, it's tough to smile. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing these articles with you. Fox News is breaking most of this right now. And again, right now, Biden and Harris, as we speak, are meeting with the U.S. hostage team dealing with the negotiations with Hamas for the release of hostages. So what happened over the weekend is Israel was continuing to move forward, trying to rescue hostages. There were some hostages that were rescued. But the downside of rescuing some hostages is that Hamas has started to execute hostages. So over the weekend, 6 hostages, their bodies were found. They were murdered. And again, it appears that they were shot, executed multiple times within the last 2 to 3 days. So as a result, by the time the Israeli forces got there, the hostages were already dead. And Israel had a huge coup, huge success rescuing some hostages. They rescued an Arab Israeli recently. And Hamas knows that Israel is coming. They're trying to save as many hostages as possible. So now they're just killing them. So it's a very difficult situation all around. You see a lot of protests going around. So over the weekend, because the bodies were rescued, you have an estimated 500,000 mobs of protesters took the streets in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and other cities. Total estimates up to 500,000 in major Israeli cities. Now, this is mainly Netanyahu's opposition. So the people that oppose them, they want them to stop the war, stop the fighting, and just negotiate to get all the hostages back. And that's really what the Biden administration and has been doing. So they're meeting now with the hostage team to figure out how do they pressure Netanyahu to just negotiate for these hostages. If it was only so simple. Hamas has rejected pretty much every deal so far. And that's the real truth behind this. They just rejected another deal for a ceasefire and exchange of hostages. That's all Hamas has. That's their major bargaining tool, is these hostages. So they're never going to give them up, because the moment they give up all their hostages, they have, and the next time they do something, again, murderous, they have nothing to protect them from getting wiped out by Israelis military. Now, they went in and they pretty much took over all of Gaza, but again, they're like cockroaches, and the majority of the population is still supporting them. So Gaza is still infested. They're still hiding hostages that were moved around during the campaigns to clear out Hamas, and while most of their command centers and everything were destroyed, they've moved around with the population. So all of this pressure on Israel completely ignores really the bad actor here, which is Hamas. They won't give up the hostages. Now they're killing hostages rather than let them go. And about a third of the 100, it's estimated about a third of the remaining hostages are already dead. And it could be much, much higher after this weekend. They might have executed the rest of the hostages, and we just don't know. The Red Cross doesn't know. So again, here's a quote from Labor Federation Chief Alon Bar David, who's one of the opposition leaders against Netanyahu. Says, we're getting body bags instead of a deal. We must reach a deal. A deal is more important than anything else. But here's the concern. It's just a hard situation all around for the families of the hostages that have been killed, for those that are still there. So Fox News, to their credit, and again, we're not going to watch the whole video because it would just take up most of the show. We could spend the entire show just on this one topic. But they brought on the father of an Israeli American still being held by Hamas. And it's like, we need a deal to save my son. But at what kind of cost? And this is why we normally don't deal with terrorists, because it only encourages more of the same bad behavior. Reward the bad behavior, you're going to get more of it, which is what we've seen with Hamas. Their atrocious behavior on October 7th and since has broken all societal norms. And he's pleading for, in his words, a deal with Satan. Make some kind of deal with Satan for my son, rather than blaming Hamas for what they're doing. The problem is Hamas doesn't want to release the hostages anyway. So his son is one of the Israeli Americans being held. Out of the 7 Americans captured, I believe there's 3 that have been confirmed dead. There's 4 more. And so, of course, in here is a picture of him, the father of one of the hostages still being held. He's very upset. He's pleading for us to do something, but a lot of times just kowtowing to terrorist organizations is not the way to go. It just allows them to do this again and re-victimize people, because, again, the Palestinian people have suffered enormously, but they're still supporting Hamas. So they've chosen to do that. So how do you negotiate with people like this? So I'm sorry, I wasn't sharing. This is the comments and some of the information directly from the Israeli American, which is not, again, he's critical of Netanyahu, critical that we haven't gotten a deal yet. We need a deal by any means possible. But at the same time, is that really going to help solve the problem? Or is Hamas just going to return the rest of the hostages and body bags? I don't think Hamas is negotiating in good faith. Never has. None of this was done in good faith. They went and killed, raped, slaughtered, and took as many hostages as possible for this very purpose, to yank the Israeli public around and use it for the very purposes that we're seeing today and over the weekend. So this is from Lloyd Austin in the Biden administration. Another article just came out. This is telling his Israeli counterpart that Hamas must be held accountable. But what does Hamas want? Hamas wants Israel to give it control of Gaza again, or at least certain portions of it. And so here the Biden-Harris administration is still figuring out the approach, and it's just recent news. We're just hitting Monday. It's a holiday weekend, so yeah, I think it's makes sense that they figure out a little bit what's going on, how to react. But holding them accountable is not giving them a peace deal and giving them control of Gaza again. That's not holding them accountable. So Austin was talking with his counterpart, Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, and he described him as vicious, illegal, immoral execution of hostages. The taking of hostages is vicious, illegal, immoral. Everything that's been done here so far by Hamas is vicious, illegal, and immoral. You can claim that Israel has done the same thing. Well, no, they've never gone and taken hostages or whatever, but that's the occupation. You can claim that, but again, one evil claim of evil does not justify the horrific rape, mass murder, etc., committed by Hamas. There's no moral equivalency here. And those that argue here have their moral compass broken or are severely compromised. So again, Israel's getting pummeled here, saying that there's a very important role for the United States. However, Hamas is doing what they want. They're marching to Iran's orders and tunes. And again, it talks about how they were brutally murdered. President Joe Biden called the deaths tragic and reprehensible, but that they will continue to work on a deal. And Biden even said over the weekend that, make no mistake, Hamas leaders will pay for these crimes. Having them pay for these crimes is not giving them a deal. Giving them a deal is what they want. So very interesting to see what happens. There's even been speculation that some of the hostages probably aren't even in Gaza anymore. That there's been attempts to smuggle them out and get them to other countries outside of Israel's reach. So again, this has been a very scary situation. Check for updates, because again, the response is developing over the weekend and today as we speak. So we're going to move on to some little bit not as serious issues, but I think it is important to understand what's going on, to know what's going on. And again, pray for those that are still captured, pray for the families of those that have been killed. And pray for those that are suffering in Gaza, that we will finally have peace in the Middle East. It's just the actors right now, and especially Hamas, in my opinion, are doing everything they can to cause war, cause tension, and not peace. And again, that's funded and supported by Iran. So we've got another break coming up, and we will move on after the break. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for staying with us here at Taxes Made Easy. Just a couple quick articles here, moving on from the sad news from the weekend. First article here talks about a great opportunity for those that are struggling in the economy. There are plenty of opportunities out there, and where are they? Mostly in the trades. Trades, engineering, again, math and science. But even then, if you're not a math and science guy, if you're willing to go and work with your hands, there's plenty of well-paying jobs out there that need people. So electrical linemen, highly trained, well-paid. They're saying 20,000 new linemen are going to be needed for the next decade, especially as we transition more and more to EVs, solar energy. There's so much that our electrical grid needs. Again, this is people make really good money working in the trades. So he's a commercial truck driver, medic, tree timber, pole climber, high wire engineer. What if it else keeps the lights on? working as for an electric company. And again, just he's one of 120,000, tending to 450,000 miles of power lines. And he's like, it's a great job if you don't mind working outside and are comfortable with heights. Again, our electric demand is expected to increase by about a third in the coming decade, and you'll need at least 20,000 more young linemen like him needed to build the grid and upgrade it over time, and it pays very well. Normal salary is $80,000 a year, started at about $41.50 an hour. However, they get a lot of overtime, and I've talked to plenty of linemen that are making well over $100,000, $120,000. No student loans. Don't have to deal with any of that. So I mean, college is great, college is nice, but college is overrated in many aspects as well. And people that are willing to go into the trades can make very good money. And this is just as a lineman. Most people, as you grow up in your career, you don't stay a lineman forever either. So here in Lineman Central, so this is a online portal for connecting prospective electrical workers with 190 training programs that 180 utility contractors nationwide tap into for new hires. I mean, this is a direct pipeline. And he said, I didn't really like it, he said. Oh no, he was an emergency room technician, didn't really like it. Suggested he go to school and, or mentioned her son went to school and was now a lineman, and he's killing it. Making good money, providing for his family. And in today's economy, 80,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but when you don't have the burdens of student loans, when you take care of your finances, you can do very well. And that's just, that's $41 an hour, not bad. And again, if you're smart with money, you can do very well for yourself. So he said, like, there's a 20-year age gap. The bulk of linemen are 20 years older than most apprentices, so they need new people. They're going to have a lot of people retiring, and there's amazing job security working for electrical companies. So something out there. There are plenty of bright spots and opportunities in our economy, and want to highlight some of those and encourage people to take advantage of that. So, I mean, I'm a big believer in the trades. This is something that's been in the news. Reparations being pushed in California, and they have Democrat majorities in both houses of the legislature, and the bills were just shelved, which made the people, the supporters of the bills, furious, and they're very upset with the Democrat Party. Why were they shelved? Well, it doesn't really mention here why. Well, I mean, the main reason is that they were afraid that they would get vetoed by Gavin Newsom, who's actually come out in support of these. But why would they shelve these bills? The main reason, it's too expensive. It would break the state budget. So you have these two bills that have been pushed by the Black Caucus, and the protesters at the Capitol furious that these weren't pushed. They were promised this. They were told they would do this. But when it comes to this, here's some of the Coalition for Just and Equitable California criticizing the California and the Legislative Black Caucus for not actually passing these bills. The problem is, it's. I understand where California is coming from, why the governor would veto it, because it would break the budget. It would absolutely break the budget, which is already under a lot of pressure. So ironically, here's a California Republican said, I'll put the vote up for motion. And he actually took up a motion to bring the bills to a vote and get lawmakers on the record. But not a single other lawmaker would second the motion. So they died for this year. Again, he's making some political points here, but saying, look, I don't support it, but I think we should have a vote So again, next year they'll probably bring up reparations, talk a good game, but I don't think they're ever going to do it because when you look at the brass tacks numbers, they can't afford it. So if you're traveling this weekend for Labor Day, this is an article from CNBC. Beware, check with your hotel, make sure they don't have a strike going on right now. So this weekend, we have 10,000 U.S. hotel workers in major American cities striking right now over the Labor Day weekend. So some of the cities, and this is mainly targeting Marriott International and Hyatt hotels, and some of the cities include San Francisco, San Diego, Honolulu, Boston, Seattle, Greenwich, Connecticut, and there are additional cities as well. So again, they're striking for better pay. They're also striking for better working conditions. What used to be a 4-man team pre-COVID has been cut down to a 3-man team. They're feeling stretched and overworked. So again, it's be aware as you're traveling, and again, this is something that is going to affect hotels across the country through this. So one last major topic I do want to dive into before we go to the topic of the day. And we've been talking about how Brazil has shut down X, or formerly Twitter, and the whole country, well, they're threatening to do so, and now they have done so. So we have a lot of attacks happening on social media, and it's not just X and Elon Musk, even though he's a huge target. We talked about the founder of Telegram being arrested, the owner of Rumble fleeing France to avoid the same kind of prosecution. So what's happening in country after country, that if these people that own social media platforms, if they're not willing to censor and do what the governments tell them to, they're being shut down. Now, to call Elon Musk out, and this is just how it runs, he would not be in some of the more totalitarian countries if he didn't agree to censor. So he does censor in some countries, but again, in democracies, democratic countries, he tries not to censor, especially speech. But it's they all do it, censor to some extent or not. But again, Facebook right now is active in their censorship. We're right in the middle of an election campaign, and again, I see it happening regularly. Mark Zuckerberg has admitted to as much recently. So here, this is a really interesting thing. So ex-Labor Secretary under Bill Clinton, Robert Reich, is arguing that Musk is out of control and he should be threatened with arrest. So his article that I'm going to cite as well, which actually came from The Guardian. I found out about it was through Fox News, but I want to focus on his own words, not filtered by Fox News. I strongly disagree with him, but again, he's claiming his enormous wealth has been used to buy a platform to speak, known as X currently, and he complains how he publicly endorsed Donald Trump, etc. I mean, it's not like we don't have the same amount of money or more supporting Kamala Harris, but he's saying he reposted a fake version of her first campaign video, clearly altered, and he's saying this is disinformation, fake, etc. And so his response, he's advocating for a boycott of Tesla. Okay, advertisers should boycott X. If people want to make their voices heard, okay. Now, this is where it gets really big government censorship. Regulators around the world should threaten Musk with arrest if he doesn't stop disseminating lies and hate on X. So who's determining lies and hate? Because we know the governments under the Biden administration has done that and had censorship through Facebook, Twitter, the mainstream media, ABC, CBS, NBC, and they've lied out their butts to us. First of all, on Biden's cognitive decline, on the Hunter Biden laptop story, Russian disinformation, lie after lie that had been perpetuated for years, not to mention all the lies that went with COVID. So government censorship is very scary. It's been very pervasive in our recent history. And free speech, in my opinion, is under huge attack. And here, former Clinton advisor advising and telling people we need to be threatening Musk with arrest. And it's happening. In Brazil, they threatened his legal representative with arrest, so he pulled out of the entire country. So either we censor and shut down all opposing opinions, as dictated by the liberal president of Brazil and his judge. And it's not just liberals. There's plenty of conservatives or on the right, fascist leaders, dictators, etc., that have censored speech. That's why the freedom of speech is so important. France is doing the same thing. And he wants this to happen not only overseas, but the United States. He wants the FTC to take down what they deem as lies, and if not, to sue him under Section 5 of the FTC Act. So, must free speech rights and the First Amendment don't take precedence over the public interest? Actually, he's dead wrong. The First Amendment rights is the public interest. Freedom of speech, the right to say whatever dumb thing you want, takes precedence, and that is the public interest. So Bill Maher, I don't have the article handy, he just came out and said on his show, and he disagrees with it completely, but he says people have the right to contest elections, to say the election was stolen. Democrats have said it time and time again, but yet they're hell on wheels going after Trump for saying the same thing that they've said many times. And they've gone after other conservatives and prosecuted them. And these are huge violations of free speech. So who determines what is information? Well, during COVID, anybody that said the truth about COVID and that the jab wasn't effective and that we didn't need to get 20 jabs was prosecuted, or either prosecuted or shut down, censored by the government, etc. And he's saying the U.S. government and taxpayers have additional power over Musk if we're willing to use it. The U.S. should terminate its contracts with him, starting with Musk's SpaceX. The SpaceX is what's going and saving these the astronauts out in space on the International Space Station. The military uses SpaceX for classified military satellites. There's the Starlink broadband service. There's so many things that they've used that actually helps. And then, of course, this is what it's really about: making sure Trump is not elected. This is really what he's going after. And I haven't been sharing this article, so I apologize for that. He kind of starts in with this, but I'm going to skip over all the fake news that he claims, because there's plenty of fake news from the left. But he goes through this, what he says: boycott advertisers. If you want to boycott Tesla, use your own purchasing power. Sure, do it. If you want to boycott advertisers that advertise on X, that's your choice. That's your freedom of speech to support or not support what you agree or don't agree with. And I would never criticize someone for doing that. But telling regulators, governments around the world, that they should censor speech and crack down on anybody they disagree with, and then that the United States should do it, this is communism. This is totalitarianism. This is cracking down on speech. And his whole purpose for doing this is to make sure that his candidate, that Trump does not get elected. Anybody supporting Trump needs to be censored, shut down, threatened with arrest. So again, he's a former U.S. Secretary of Labor for Clinton, and now he's a professor, of course, at Berkeley. And again, this is his own article, straight from his words. And moving on, just wanted to. Sorry, I get a little keyed up about this because free speech is a little important to our way of life. X is officially shut down in Brazil after the government's order, and then Elon Musk responded and said, "Look, he's just doing the will of the liberal president." But we see liberal governments, and conservative governments out there. It's not. This is not a liberal conservative issue. Ironically, traditional liberals were staunch defenders of free speech. I don't know why they abandoned it. Maybe because they've been in power for 12 of the last 16 years, and as far as in the United States and the presidency. But as Americans, we should really be bothered by government censorship. So one last article, California is moving to ban deep fakes and regulate AI. Now, this is from Hot Air, which is a right-leaning source. It is not as clear-cut as you would seem. Deep fake video messages. There's a proposed ban on making these videos and images to influence public opinion. People are doing this all the time. So it's right now on Gavin Newsom's desk for final approval. And again, California, they love regulating things. The article actually, when you read through it, they're actually fairly supportive of some of what they're trying to do. But they're saying, the cat's already in the bag. It's already too late. You can't really control this. And for California to try to regulate AI, the way they're trying to do is by going after the social media companies and would force tech giants to start disclosing what data they use and set up safety guardrails on the designs for AI. So again, this is where we get into censorship. This is where we get into the government telling people what they can and can't see. And again, it can be very concerning moving forward as far as for free speech protections. So again, we need to be very vigilant of our rights, or we'll lose them. And there's plenty of people trying to erode at them or get rid of them altogether. So, got one last article. I'm not going to get to it. And after the break, we're going to really hit the main topic for the day hard. Sorry, there's just so much information here to talk about. And we're going to really dive into expenses and try to wrap that up when we come back from this break. Welcome back, everybody. And we're just going to continue the conversation about allowable expenses. And we're going to jump right back to IRS.gov, which is where we were getting a lot of these expenses. And I just want to kind of walk you through a little bit what we're looking at, how to find these expenses. And we're going to start off with a quick review of how to find it. So if you just go to IRS.gov and you type in collection standards, just comes right up, collection financial standards. And you click on this, brings you to the main page where all of the 4 standards that they have are listed out. So we talked last week about food, clothing, and other items. This is where they just have one number for the number. So based on the number of people that are claimed on the last tax return, you get that number. Now, if you had a baby that was born, or if you just got married, if your situation just changed, you can argue for a greater number, but usually the IRS is just going to want to go off of the last tax return, who was on the last tax return. Now, the second thing after food, clothing, out-of-pocket healthcare expenses. We talked about that. Just a quick review. It's based on the number of people on the tax return that are under 65 or older. So if you have 2 people under 65, you're going to get 83 times 2, which is 166. If you have 2 people under 65 and 1 over 65, you'll get 166 plus 158. I'm not going to do that quick math, but you get the point. So you get 166, that's over $300. So I think 313 or something like that. But based on the number of people in the home, this number goes up. If you actually have more expenses than this, you just have to prove it up, because there are plenty of people out there with severe health expenses that cost way more than the standard. Now, housing and utilities, this is a big expense. Depends on your state and where you live. For California, let's say if you're in Yolo County, it's where I grew up. For one person, $2,540, 2 people, up to 5 people in the home, and then it caps out. So if you have more than 5 people in the home, they don't care. They're just going to cap it right at that. That's for a family of 5 or more. So that's the amount they will allow for housing and utilities. When you look at this, these numbers are usually pretty low. And so when you look at the differences between 4 and 5, very small difference. Again, these numbers have not kept up with inflation. Might look like a decent number here, but when you actually look at what rents are in California or mortgages, it's very, very low, and it's by state throughout the entire country. So if you have questions about that, give us a call. We'll go through it. We did touch on that quite a bit in the last episode. But this is transportation. Transportation can get tricky. So we had started talking about primary and secondary on a return. And again, this looks like it's pretty simple, right? If you don't have a car, and there's 2 major categories here. Do you have a car or do you not have a car? If you don't have a car, the IRS will give you $215 for public transportation. No questions asked. You have to Uber, you have to use the train. You need some method of transportation. So if you just don't have a vehicle, it doesn't matter if you're spending the money or not, the IRS will give you $215. Can you get more than this amount? Yes, but you have to prove it up, and it has to make sense for your situation. So let's say someone is in New York and they have to pay for cabs for their work, or if you can document it and show that you're spending more on public transportation, you can get credit for it. If you're always on the subway, if you have to take a ferry every single day to get to work. So, again, Seattle that can be a situation there. You can get more than the allowable amount, but you have to prove it up. Now, if you do have a vehicle, we're going to focus on one person. There are 2 things here. So you got to understand, with the public transportation, it's just straightforward, $215. If you own a vehicle, there are 2 expenses here: ownership and operating expenses. So that can get very confusing here. So just take a step back. Ownership costs are just how much does it cost you to have access to a vehicle. So if you're leasing the car, if you have a payment plan and you have a loan out against it, or either one of those 2, or if you're paying a family member and you can document the regular payments on it, that's what's going to fall under ownership costs. If you have a car that's paid for, you're not going to get anything in this category. So for the one person, it's $619. Now I do remember going over this last time, but for 2 people, it's $1,238. But that's per vehicle. So if you have one car with a payment of $1,000 a month, and your second car is $200 a month, you're not going to get $1,200. You're going to get $619 plus $200. So the first vehicle, $1,000 monthly payment, will cap out at $619. You're not going to get the full $1,000. It'll stop at $619, and then your second vehicle if you have a payment of $200, will be added to that, so for a total amount of $819. So be very careful about that. The other concern here is to get two vehicles, you have to have a primary and secondary on your tax return. So what they're really looking for is husband and wife or married partners, where you are filing jointly with someone else on your tax return. So if it's you filing with your father, you have two adults. You can have two drivers in the home, but they still only allow for one car because it's just primary. You're not filing jointly with someone else on your tax return. It's just how they work. And you're maxed out on two cars. If you have more car payments, tough luck. They're not going to give you credit for it. And if you have teenagers, or if you have multiple vehicles with payments, if you use one, you have a truck and then a motorcycle for fun, they're only going to give you credit for one vehicle payment. And then the operating costs, same thing, is for that primary and secondary on the tax return, one car, two cars. Now it's interesting how this works when we talk about operating costs. So ownership costs, your lease expense, your loan payments, or again, if you're purchasing it from a private party and you're making regular payments on it, usually between family members, you can document that and get credit for that. And IRS really doesn't question it as long as you're making those payments. And you can show that there's, look, the car was exchanged, here's the regular payments. It helps to have some kind of promissory note or written agreement, but they don't fight it too much. Now, operating costs are different. Operating costs is what does it cost you to actually run the vehicle? Because you can have a car on a monthly payment, but it's sitting in your garage, it's not operating, whatever, but you still are paying to own the vehicle. But to operate the vehicle is gas, license registration, vehicle maintenance. Those are the three big things here to operate a vehicle. And so they have standards established throughout the country. Some are more generous than others. And depending, with gas prices really fluctuating, a lot of times these numbers are going to be low. So if you're spending above this, all you have to do is prove it up, which can be, the main thing is you just save your gas receipts for a couple months, and that's a great way to prove it. It's harder to show with maintenance because maintenance is more regular, but if you have a lot of maintenance going on, if you can show the last couple of years, hey, this is what I've had to put into my car, you can get more money for maintenance as well. And car insurance can be very high for people. And again, it's going up nationally by quite a bit. So want to break this down. So this is just the Northeast region. The way that happens, or the Northwest region. Here's the overall amount, 285, 570, and it's broken up by region throughout the country. So we have the Northeast, where here's your standard amount, 285 for one, 570 for two vehicles. If you go to the Midwest, for the Midwest region, it's 239, 478 for two vehicles. Then you have the South region, the West region, and the West region. So it changes slightly depending on where you are. So why do they have all these other numbers? Because general numbers for entire regions are inaccurate. So if you are in specific metropolitan areas, the numbers can be different, higher or lower. So Boston, to own a car, it's more expensive, $310 per vehicle. New York, they give $377 or $754 for two vehicles. And then you have Philadelphia. And how do they tell if it's the New York metro region or if you just qualify for the Northeast region? It is by county. So if you come down here, it breaks it down. And Boston, if you're in Boston, you qualify for the Boston standard. If you're in Essex, Middlesex, Norfolk, Plymouth, Suffolk counties in Massachusetts, or New Hampshire still has the Boston metropolitan area, Rockingham or Stratford. So New York, of course, has the most counties, But they have a bunch in New York's, of course, Bronx, Kings County, New York County. I mean, there's a bunch of them, but also New Jersey and one county in Pennsylvania all qualify for the New York standard for the New York metropolitan area. And as you saw, New York is much higher than Boston. Philadelphia, again, it spans a bunch of states and counties, all qualify for the allowable amount for Philadelphia. And then it continues on Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Minneapolis, St. Paul, St. Louis. And over in the West or in the South, again, you have Atlanta, Baltimore, Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Miami, Tampa, Washington, D.C. So if you live close to, and some of them, Honolulu, it's just Honolulu County because it's an island. But you have Anchorage, Denver, Colorado, LA, Phoenix, San Diego. It's just San Diego County, but it's a huge county. San Francisco covers a bunch of counties, and Seattle. So if you fall into one of those city areas, you're going to get the standard for that city. So it definitely gets a little confusing here. And here in the Northeast region, the regional standard is 285. If you live in one of those metropolitan areas in any of those counties listed, then you get an increased amount depending on which metropolitan area you live in. Now here in the Midwest, 239 is the average. It actually, in Cleveland, it's exactly the same at 239. St. Louis, it actually goes down. So the government number crunchers have estimated it's actually less in St. Louis to own a vehicle than if you're just out in the rural area. In the South, again, it starts off at, say, 60. But when you come to California, in the West area, they're estimating it costs a lot less to own and operate a vehicle in Anchorage than it does just out anywhere else in Alaska. Honolulu, the number is actually lower because they're not doing a lot of driving on an island. And Seattle is actually a little bit lower than the West average. So you have to pay attention to what state you're in. And if you're close to a metropolitan area, look up that allowable amount for your state. So they ask people all the time, what are you paying for car insurance? What do you pay for gas? And when you give these numbers to the IRS, they're not accepting these full numbers. Their computer system for all of these allowable amounts just plugs in the allowable amount, and that's what gets kicked out to you. So if the IRS tells you you can pay $1,000 a month, and you're like, hold the phone, the numbers I just gave you add up to, show I don't have any money. I feel like I'm broke. My budget shows that I'm broke. What's going on here? Why are you asking for $1,000? This is why. You have not only on the allowable amounts, but other payments that you have that the IRS just doesn't allow for. And so we're going to, as we continue on, we're going to have to continue this talking about expenses, but there are plenty of expenses that the IRS just doesn't allow for. So you have these expenses. One of the biggest is credit card payments. Tax debt takes priority over credit card payments. It's just unsecured debt. And so that's a big expense that most people have. They feel like they have to continue to make these payments. They don't want to destroy their credit. But it makes it harder when the IRS says, well, we don't care about the $1,000 a month you're paying for your credit cards. Give us the money instead. And, people don't feel like they have the money or the ability to make those payments. IRS doesn't care. So when you're preparing to see what you qualify for the IRS and what kind of deal the IRS will actually give you, it is very important to understand these allowable numbers, to understand what the IRS will give you credit, won't give you credit, and it's kind of a changing situation with this current administration. Because unfortunately, over the last few years, we've been surprised plenty of times because, oops, we're doing something different. Oops, we're fighting you more on this, or we're allowing this more, but we're going to fight you more over here. It has become more and more restrictive and harder to get people to qualify for programs. So it is very important to know what's going on with the IRS. If you have questions, we do a free consultation. This is what we do day in and day out. We go over someone's expenses and steer them in the right direction. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.